Cool. Well, I don't know if I'm going to be able to follow up that energy, but I will give it a crack with the content. So as I said, I'm going to be talking about EAT, and particularly trust or bust, winning over users and bots in SEO. It'll make sense in a minute when we get into that. Here's a bit of EAT about me, but Dusty's already covered that. As I said, SEO leader, tasker, co-host of the Sydney SEO Collective, which is a meetup we host every last Tuesday of every month in Sydney. Really awesome speakers, a lot of up-and-comers, a lot of prosperity guys and girls have talked there. It's really great. And also, I'm just passionate about building websites. I love building websites. I love buggering around with different SEO tactics and seeing what works. So let's get into it. So what's the problem? In 2024, users are hungry. They're hungry for great content, but misinformation and spammy AI content has left a bad taste in users' mouths. And for Google, Googlebot crawls over trillions of pages, but it only indexes about 400 billion of those pages. And then even worse, less than 10% of users or people visit page 2 of the queries. And so for Google, they really need to serve up the best, like a great restaurant with a small menu. So let's eat. So first, what is EAT? I thought before we got into what is EAT, let's talk about what EAT isn't. EAT isn't a ranking factor, and I know there's been a lot of debate recently, a lot of chat on social about whether or not EAT's a ranking factor, but it's not. It is, as Google describes, more of a concept. So it helps basically Google systems look at different factors. So Google systems like Google Discover, Google News, even SGE look at different factors in assessing what demonstrates aspects of EAT. But it's also an important concept in the Search Quality Raters Guidelines, which is a guidelines set for these quality raters that are essentially training the next algorithms that are coming for Google. In addition, they're also a great way for us to assess how Google might be looking at a website, but more importantly, how users might be looking at a website. So instead, think of EAT as an umbrella term that looks at different factors, different aspects of how Google and users might assess content. And I like to look at it as a quality classifier. So if you think of systems like helpful content, the review system, reliable information, and original content systems, they are systems that are essentially under that EAT umbrella. And so if you think about it more as a quality concept that kind of applies to both a page and a website, it'll help you more deeply understand how EAT would affect your rankings. So let's talk about the acronym EAT. So EAT stands for Experience, Expertise, Authoritiveness, and Trust. And from this diagram from the Search Quality Raters Guidelines, you can see that trust is at the center of EAT. So let's start there. So what is trust? Trust is essentially Google's way of asking what risks are there if a user trusts this website? Who's behind this website? Are they reliable? What's their reputation online? And what can users do if something goes wrong? And the reason I started with trust is because it is, in Google's words, basically, if you don't have trust, the other aspects of EAT don't matter. So the next aspect in EAT is authoritiveness. Authoritiveness is essentially looking at whether a website or a content creator is the go-to resource for a topic. Then you've got expertise. Expertise is looking at whether somebody knows what they're talking about, whether when they source information, they're not just regurgitating what's already out there, and whether they have the necessary knowledge or skills for the topic. A good way to look at expertise is, would you trust, say, electrical advice from an electrician or somebody who is a bit of a DIY enthusiast? Or if we flip it, would you take SEO advice from the guys at Prosperity versus some bloke on Reddit who said that meta keywords is a great way to get on Google in 2024? Lastly, that leaves us with experience, and it's the newest E in the EAT acronym, and it's basically looking at the genuineness of content. Does this person have real first-hand experience, life experience for this topic? So all these elements, experience, expertise, and authoritative, essentially layer up to the assessment of trust. So let's get into trust, but before we start there, let's look at building trust with users. So firstly, you may be wondering why I'm starting with users. And to answer that question, we need to go from trust to antitrust. So like many who have seen the latest kind of antitrust lawsuit, you might have seen this slide. And it's basically confirming what a lot of us already suspected, which is that Google was at some stage using user signals to influence rankings. And maybe they don't do this anymore, maybe they do, who knows. But essentially, isn't this what the Search Quality Raters program is about? Using user signals to assess rankings and content online. So how do you build trust with users? So one of the first questions that users, that you're trying to answer for users is, in trust is like, what they're asking is, what do you say about your site? So one of the first places users will usually start with assessing trust, looking at your site, is your about page. And often these are really like ordinary, really basic, but this is a great example from the Wirecutter. And what I like about this example is they talk about how they earn money, and they talk about the fact that while they do earn affiliate commissions, if you return a product, they don't get paid those affiliate commissions. And that automatically creates a large amount of trust with users that the recommendations the Wirecutter is making are in the best interest of both parties. Another way users might assess trust by looking at your website is looking at your team page. Team pages offer a really insightful view of who are the people behind this website. And as you can see from this Yoast example, you can see there's a lot of really influential people who have posted a lot of things when you look through there, and you can get a grasp that it's not just some random affiliate site with a nameless person behind it. The other question we said is, what can a user do if something goes wrong? And that's where contact us pages come in. So in the Quality Raters guidelines, they talk about this a lot, and they expect that most businesses have some form of contact information. So making sure you have an email address, your address, and ways for people to get in touch are really important in answering that question for users. And lastly, in what you say about your site is policies. I know it sounds boring and legal, but just having a return policy on your site, allowing people to see what they can do if something goes wrong is really important. And users have been trained to scroll to the bottom of a page to see what your returns policy is, all that kind of stuff. So, or you can talk about your website in the way that paints it in a great light. Most users are skeptical, and so the next question that comes about, and I think we might all find ourselves doing this, is going to that first page of Google and going beyond the first link and looking at what comes up. So what are others saying about your site? And this is really reiterated in the Search Quality Raters guidelines on page 24. They actually offer the Search Quality Raters a bunch of ways they can find online reputation information about websites. But one trick you can do right now is go and Google your website, website.com minus siteexample.com, and this will show you all of the results that Google understands about your website without your website in it. And it's a really helpful way to audit your online brand presence before you start trying to optimize it. But when you do start trying to optimize it, often you'll see a bunch of kind of random stuff when you search your brand after the first couple of links. And one of the best ways you can start by optimizing your brand SERP is by building brand references. So if you're a big enough business, Wikipedia is the obvious example, but if you're smaller, websites like Crunchbase or CB Insights have no kind of mandatory rules, so you can optimize those. But also just like having your social media profiles, claiming them all, having your description, some information about your business are a really easy way to own that first page of Google for your brand. So love them or hate them, independent reviews sites are here to stay, and when you search most brands, you will get these coming up. So making sure you have claimed these and you've responded to your negative reviews and you've worked on building positive reviews are a great way to improve your brand reputation online. Trustpilot and reviews.io, productreview.com.au are all really great generic review platforms that usually rank for most brands. You've also got directories like Yelp, Yellow Pages and Facebook. And if you've got an app, these often rank sort of number 2 is the app stores. And also obviously the Google My Business, which we had the big talk about before. The other way users will assess your reputation is through news articles, and they are held in much higher regard than, say, the things that you say or the media you control. So, you know, if I say the word Optus, you do a Google for Optus, they've been in the news quite a lot, and when you search their brand, this is the first thing that comes up. And so this isn't an easy tactic to build press, but one of the things you can start doing is start doing some Harrow outreach, start doing some digital PR, and start trying to build some positive press so at least it helps to outweigh or level out the negative media maybe you have. And say you're a more specific business, there's other really great sources of credible information that you can use. For marketing agencies, there's Clutch. For beauty websites, there's Fresher. You've got Rate My Agent and G2 for software platforms. These are really great platforms to have really specific information, actually can give you really good ideas of what you should be doing on your site. So the last question in trust that users might ask is, what's visible on the page? So I know this might sound really simple, but recency bias is a big cognitive factor that plays into people's assessments of trust. And just having the date and showing the information is current and up to date is really important in increasing user engagement and stopping that pogo sticking back to the Google search results. Another thing you can do is having policies and disclaimers around, especially if you're in the affiliate space, around how you make money, your editorial integrity, and having them up front. Bankrate does a really good job. You actually click these, they're a pop-up, they don't send you off the site, which helps users trust the information that they're seeing straight away. So that leads us to authoritativeness. And essentially what users are asking here is this website the go-to resource? So how does that look to users? If we ignore the technical concept of topical authority, for users what it means is that you show up. Whenever they're searching a term related to what you do as a business, you show up. And if we take Ahrefs for an example, whenever I'm doing some research on SEO, perhaps writing content for this slide deck, you know, they came up every time. And maybe not in the first spot, but they came up. And so for users, they start building this brand love as they go through the process. And maybe when they get to the transactional bit, you might be position number 3, but you've built this brand trust and you're the right person for them at that stage. As much as I love keyword tools like Ahrefs, if you want to build authority and you're a small player, competition is the killer. And keyword tools just can't compete with Google for speed and understanding of topics. So look beyond keyword tools. Look at things like Google Trends, News, related searches, and suggest. These allow you to get on top of a trending topic, on top of related searches, and really own that space. But I would also argue go beyond keywords. So Gemini, for example, just released a code platform. Maybe you have been writing about AI, and could you update your Bard article to talk about this, or could you write a new article or great tutorial, offer some expert opinions or ideas or different take on things, and look at YouTube videos. They're a great source of information and insights, different things that you mightn't see covered in topic or maybe even industry newsletters or forums. So when we think of domain authority, most of us think of DR, we think of backlinks, we think of referring domains. But that isn't the way that users think about it. What users think about it as trust by association. So when they see your links on Wikipedia or a niche specific site, they grow this trust by association. When they go through to your site, they take that level of trust that they had with the other site and they funnel it into your website, and so it increases the legitimacy of your content. Another way you can build authority is through building brand authority. So let's take the example of Epic Gardening, which is a great example of this. They have gone beyond creating written content. To build brand authority, they've built a huge YouTube channel, and the strategy is pretty simple. They basically create YouTube-type videos that are essentially a video version of their article, and then they promote each of the pieces each way to build that brand authority. And they've gained, over the last decade, 2.76 million subscribers off that. Another way is getting on top of platforms early, like TikTok, Instagram Reels, or YouTube Shorts. Here they've taken that video content, cut it down, made it really personable, and built a massive following, 2.9 million followers over on TikTok. But you can also, maybe video isn't your jam and you have some great images, you can use platforms like Instagram or Pinterest to build a following as well. And the brilliance of a platform like, say, Pinterest is it not only builds you a following on this social platform, but also drives traffic to your website. But what's this got to do with SEO? Well, as you can see, over the last decade, as they've built these social platforms, you can see their brand searches are doing pretty well off the back of that. But that's brands. What about authors? So Kevin is the founder of Epic Gardening. He's a great example of building author authority. And he's really sort of a overnight entrepreneur. Like he's self-taught, he's grown this business just learning as he goes. So the way he builds his authority is he produces a lot of content. He contributes to a lot of news articles on gardening. He also joins in interviews and podcasts in his niche. And he's also written a couple of books on this topic. Another way he builds his influence and his author authority is through his journey as an entrepreneur. So he's been on lots of podcasts, lots of videos talking about that. And as you can see, while not as big as the brand in general, like his keyword search volume for his brand name has grown quite significantly over time, and he's ranking for things like gardeners in San Diego. So expertise. The question users are asking here is, does this content demonstrate knowledge or skill? One of the best ways, and I've always given this feedback to writers that I've worked with, is if you're going to make a claim, back it up with a source. So citations, external links are a great way to build expertise through content. Another way is author profiles, right? So author biographical information gives a real insight into who wrote this content, their expertise, their education, and you can also verify that they're a legitimate person through their social media profiles and images. However, sometimes the person writing the content isn't an expert, but an expert author, and that's where you can look to take somebody else's authority and pop it onto your content. So Google recently updated their guidelines explicitly calling out that it's either written by an expert author, or reviewed by an expert. And so reviewing or editing or contributors are a great way to leverage that expertise by borrowing that authority. And so as you can see in this example about running, it's reviewed by this expert running coach who's trained 30,000 runners. However, sometimes there's a real risk to your health, there's a real risk to your money, and an experienced running coach, might be great for that last example, but an experienced sauna user is not helpful here because we want to know the risks to somebody's health. And so that's where you can get people to medically review. And so in this example, we've got a doctor and she's reviewed it, and it gives a whole lot of legitimacy to the content. The last thing you can do is also put in a fact check process like NerdWallet. They've got a process here, and basically you can give them feedback, they'll post corrections, and it gives some more kind of trust and expertise to this content. The last E in EAT for users is experience, and basically what they're asking is this content genuine? So House does a really good job of this in their House Pro contributor articles, and the first place you can really start is by talking in first person. So you can see from this example, this is from a designer and she talks, I did this, we did that, and this shows that it's coming from personal experience. Another great example of experience is NapLab. So ask yourself, what is different to your content than the other 9 SERPs, right? What unique insight do you offer? And so NapLab have a great example here where they have all different ratings for their mattresses, cooling, motion, transfer, response time, and I'll let you read the yellow one. But they're great examples of what people actually care about when they're looking for a mattress. So the other things that they do is they offer, pros and cons lists, and they have first-person view in their verdict, but actually talk about in this example that this is the mattress that they sleep on. Another question users will look to for experience is do they have a background in experience? Have they, do they have a history here? And this Jay, you can see he clearly has a history in building things out of timber. And so another great thing Jay does is on Instructables is he looks at adding extra value to his articles by adding video, another way that people can consume content. But for those people who want to read, he takes those video stills and he creates really unique, insightful images so people can really understand the points that he's trying to make. Okay, so that's users. But how does this translate into how bots might assess trust? So one of the ways that bots might assess trust is on-page signals. And these are the easiest to influence, so they're the ones that I reckon are the best to start with. So I know it sounds obvious and it's SEO 101, but keyword usage is still really important for this aspect of on-page signals. And if you look at the Google Helpful Content Guidelines, they ask questions like, does the title accurately represent what the content is about, the topic, and is the content comprehensive view of the topic? And so keyword usage is an important way in making sure that, that you answer those questions. Another way that bots might look at this is through TD-IDF, engrams, and NLP. So TD-IDF, term density and inverse density frequency, is essentially looking at the correlation between words across other pages that are ranking in the SERPs, and it's long been thought that even if it's not used in the algorithm, it's helpful for Google's understanding of a page and how it relates to a query. But more advanced systems like BERT and soon to be, and soon MUM, are based on NLP, and they really help Google understand the relevance between different words and how they're constructed in a sentence in the content. And so using a tool like Surfer is a great way to get started with TD-IDF, NLP, and engrams. The other part of BERT is its understanding of how queries relate to intent. And so we call this search intent, right? So if you can look at this example of best backpacks versus buy backpacks, it's really obvious that one is a review and and one is an e-commerce page. But sometimes it's not so obvious, and so really reviewing the SERPs and looking at the different things that the bots and the Google systems care about help you understand what a comprehensive coverage of this topic is. So as you can see in the first example, they've taken a pros and cons list, they've got a review rating, they've got an author there, and they've also got site links to the headings. Whereas in the flip side, they don't. Another system that could be used in the assessment of EAT is something called passage indexing. So earlier we spoke about topical authority, and essentially, to break it down, topical authority, to look at it simply, is having enough coverage of a topic, but also ranking for it, right? And that's a way that Google might assess topical authority. But that doesn't mean that you have to write an article for every query that exists on the web, because of passage indexing coming to the rescue. So passage indexing, as you can see, we've done a search here for is North Face Borealis backpack waterproof. However, the article that's returned is a review for the North Face Borealis. And that's because within this content, we've got a paragraph that's been detected by the passage indexing system, and it understands that the content that you're looking for is contained in this article. So it's a great way to add to comprehensiveness of article while building topical authority. Another system that Google uses is query deserves freshness, or a freshness system, and it looks at whether content should be relevant to a date. So if we take this example like Taylor Swift's biggest concert attendance, if we looked at it in January, we'd have got an answer around Pittsburgh, but in February, we're getting an answer around the MCG. And back to our original slide on date, this is where having up-to-date content is important. Another system that Google will likely use in the assessment of EAT and the comprehensiveness of topics is something called neural matching. So earlier we spoke about going beyond keywords. This is because users don't care about keywords, and Google's known this for a while, so this is where neural matching comes in. So what we've searched for here is why does my TV look strange, and we've been returned an article around the soap opera effect. And so by creating content that is relevant to your niche and to the topics that are trending, you'll likely get picked up in other queries like this to build topical authority around the topic. And lastly, in the on-page system, another system that Google might use is something called knowledge-based trust. So there's an academic paper called Knowledge-Based Trust, Estimating Trustworthiness of Web Sources. And Google talks quite at length about kind of general consensus of articles and understanding what experts say and whether your content matches that general consensus. So the system looks something like this. It crawls a website, crawls trusted sites, creates a standard of accurate information, compares it against its knowledge base, and then generates a trust score, and then rewards websites that conform and penalizes those that don't. Okay, so that's on-page signals. Off-page signals are another important part of how Google might assess trust. So obviously we've got PageRank. PageRank is the understanding that links between pages, the more links basically the more authority that page has on a topic. And so just to drive home that PageRank is one of the systems that Google most certainly uses in its assessment of EAT. From how Google fights disinformation in 2019, they talk about PageRank being one of the useful signals they use to understand authoritativeness. Another system they might use is based on a patent called producing a ranking for pages using distance in a web link graph. So what this basically is looking at the distance between a trusted source like, say, Wikipedia, and how many links away from that source a website is. And this was brought in around the Panda patent to essentially try and get rid of page rank manipulation by looking at the trusted source. So building those references that we talked about earlier are important in this concept. Another way Google might assess topical authority is through anchor text and looking at the entities contained in text. And so making sure that anchor text makes sense to the page it's on and the page it's going to is important in the assessment of topical authority. Now, that's all great. Another thing that we've really, been a lot of conjecture around in the SEO industry is whether links even matter and whether brand mentions are something that could be assessed by Google. So there's another patent around that basically talks about something called implied links, which looks at where there's brand mentions that infer linking. And so whether or not Google uses that patent is kind of irrelevant. We know that large language models are based off of a large corpus of the most popular websites. And so utilizing brand mentions could definitely be a way in how Google assesses EAT, especially into the world of SGE. Another way Google might look at assessing reputation is through this natural language processing. And so if you can see from this example here, G2 uses NLP to basically group reviews into concepts, which could not be unlike what Google does. They also might use something like sentiment analysis. And so popping in that first example, you can see that they've created some understanding of that first review around most of it being positive and budget being negative. Lastly, the off-page signals is popularity. So many kind of industry figures like Matt Diggity have talked about in the last September helpful update. There was a clear correlation between brand searches and getting through the helpful content update. And finally, in this off-page signals is a patent around vectors, website vectors and author vectors. The theory goes that basically Google can build these vectors and understandings of authors and websites and associate them with topics in a way that they can assess those signals to essentially assess something like EEAT. Okay, so getting towards the end now, knowledge graph. So we spoke about entities earlier and how they relate to links, but they form part of something which is called the knowledge graph. So the idea of entities in the knowledge graph is you've got things like organizations. In the red, we've got people, we've got places, and we've got topics. And these are all entities. And the knowledge graph brings them all together using relationships to understand how these things relate to each other. And so most of us would have seen this, which is the knowledge panel. And so how's that different to the knowledge graph? Essentially, the knowledge panel is just a visualization of that graph and the relationships between those entities. However, it's important to know that the knowledge panel, just because you're not in the knowledge panel doesn't mean you're not in the knowledge graph. Google just hasn't established enough confidence in that topic or entity. And so it's important to understand how we can influence the topic, the knowledge graph. So one of the ways that the knowledge graph is influenced is through trusted sources. For your brand, generally, your website is the most trusted source on your brand entity. And this is something called the entity home that Jason Bernard talks about. However, sometimes they'll use other trusted sources like Wikipedia, as you can see in this description. And so understanding that building these brand references across trusted sources allows you to influence your knowledge graph and therefore the knowledge panel listing.